You probably clicked on this video not knowing whether or not the title was sarcastic. Well, the good news or bad news, depending on what you wanted, is that this is a totally serious analysis and guide on Barbara. Disregarding the fact that I'm a Triple Crown Barbara enjoyer and definitely not biased, I really do think that Barbara has slowly but surely gotten more use outside of beginner and mid-game progression. As a free character available to everyone, it's worth giving her the time of day again. If you're curious about what new builds there are for Barbara and which team she fits well into, you've come to the right video. Without further ado, here's what to consider when building Mondstadt's #1 idol, Barbara. Barbara is one of the simplest characters in Genshin Impact, and truthfully, there's not much to cover regarding her own kit. It doesn't take much more than a 10-year-old who knows what 5x3 is to understand that Barbara heals the active character over time with her elemental skill, and the entire party with her elemental burst. Rather, what makes Barbara a little more interesting is what she can provide to the rest of the team with specific weapons and artifacts. Barbara has two cheap, staple support options with the 3-star Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayer's Catalyst and the 4-star Artifact Set Instructor. When these two build options are paired together, Barbara favors her standard stat focus of HP % in the Sands and Goblet, healing bonus in the Circlet, and then HP plus energy recharge in artifact substats. The Thrilling Tales Catalyst buffs the attack of a character switching in after the wielder by a whopping 48% at R5, while the 4-set Instructor increases the entire party's elemental mastery by 120 after the wielder triggers an elemental reaction. Not only are both support options strong and easily obtainable by all players, they also fit perfectly with Barbara's primary support playstyle. The classic Barbara playstyle is all about setting up her Hydro Ring for healing over time, then switching to a character that can utilize the buffs from her build. Using Barbara's Hydro Ring can apply the Hydro element onto nearby enemies, and we can use this to our advantage. The 4-set Instructor requires its wielder to be on field for the effect to activate, and creating an elemental reaction when using Barbara's Hydro Ring can do this right before switching out to a DPS character. For example, the switch-in can be a Hypercarry like Xiao who spends a lot of time on field, or it can be an off-field DPS like Xiangling, Beta, or Rosaria who can snapshot the Thrilling Tales attack buff onto their elemental burst. The point here is that although Barbara does not do damage herself, she makes up for it by providing buffs to the team. Look at every other popular healer in Genshin, and they all provide something else aside from pure healing. Now you may be asking, how is the old Barbara build relevant to her current rise? These support options have been in the game since day one, so what's all the fuss about right now? Well, keeping the previous build in mind, Dendro has dominated Genshin's team building like a tidal wave, and Barbara definitely didn't wipe out trying to ride that wave. With all the new elemental reactions, elemental mastery has skyrocketed in value, and as you would guess, that means it's Barbara's lucky day since her older support options like the 4-set Instructor have rejuvenated in value compared to pre-patch 3.0. The easiest way to visualize Barbara's new impact on teams with her cheap support build is with the new characters from patch 3.1, Nilou and Cyno. Starting with Nilou, a common free-to-play setup is Nilou, Barbara, and then any of the two between Kale, Dendro MC, and Yao Yao. It's common for an off-field Barbara to run the classic cheap support build with the 4-set Instructor when Nilou takes the field, but that's not necessarily the case for an on-field Barbara. In fact, if you're fortunate enough to have Nilou, it actually gives Barbara the opportunity to build the 4-set Gilded Dreams or the 4-set Flower of Paradise Lost for Dendro core damage thanks to her Hydro Catalyst attacks. Stats for this Barbara build usually have triple EM main stats with either an EM weapon such as Fruit of Fulfillment or a standard HP weapon like Thrilling Tales or Prototype Amber. Even with EM main stat artifacts, the higher substat distribution of 5-star pieces will help keep your Barbara tanky enough to not die to self-bloom damage as long as she's level 90. On the flip side, Barbara serves as the perfect off-field support for Genshin's newest hypercarry, Cyno. Before switching into Cyno, we can set up Barbara's Hydro Ring and trigger an elemental reaction in the process. With both the Thrilling Tales Catalyst and the 4-set Instructor equipped, that's 48% attack and 120 EM for Cyno. Even though these buffs don't last for the entirety of Cyno's painfully long rotation, it's indisputable that both are impactful on Cyno if you execute your rotations correctly. Cyno's most consistent team takes advantage of Quicken and Hyperbloom when paired with Nahida and Kokomi respectively. Oftentimes, this archetype is shortened to Quick Bloom teams by theory crafters. For any player who doesn't have Watatsumi's Divine Priestess, Barbara is a nice substitute for Kokomi with a long-lasting elemental skill that mimics the ideal Quick Bloom team with Cyno and Kokomi. Overall, Nilou and Cyno are the perfect examples of Barbara's Bloom support capabilities, but they aren't the only options for Barbara's new teams. She can always work in standard Hyperbloom and Burgeon teams because she's a Catalyst character with on-field Hydro capabilities and cheap buffs.
残念ながら私は剣術の才能がまるでないみたい
The other Barbara builds, aside from the tried and true support options that we discussed, provide a little bit of everything. If you don't like the low investment instructor, then this other build will look to maximize her healing and net Barbara some personal DPS as well. Let's backtrack a little bit from Sumeru back to Inazuma to talk about an older build. Although Inazuma didn't give us an entirely new element, it did give us two fun and niche options to pair together outside of the standard Thrilling Tales and 4-set instructor meta that everyone loves with Dendro. Namely, let's tackle the Catalyst Everlasting Moonglow and the artifact set Ocean Hued Clam. Everlasting Moonglow is often outshined by Thrilling Tales because it's simply not worth your Primo Gems on the limited weapon banner, and rightfully so. Even though I'm an R5 donut haver alongside my Triple Crown Barbara, I definitely agree with anyone who shares that sentiment. While it lacks the value to be worth free-to-play Primo Gems and doesn't provide any buff to teammates, it's undeniable that the donut is the ultimate healing weapon. Everlasting Moonglow works wonders with the artifact Ocean Hued Clam, which deals damage based on how much healing you can output every 3.5 seconds. This damage will cap out at 30k damage per bubble without factoring in enemy resistance. Should you want to use a free-to-play weapon instead of the donut, there's the classic Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers or Prototype Amber, which both give extra HP for healing and only perform around 5 to 10% worse than Everlasting Moonglow for healing. As expected, any combination of Moonglow, Prototype Amber, and Thrilling Tales plus the 4-set Ocean Hued Clam provides a nice option for a hybrid healer and DPS Barbara if you don't have a Nilou to pair with a full EM Barbara. Remember that outside of Nilou teams, Barbara is never the trigger of bloom damage, so we forego the EM build and maintain her normal healing build with HP, and healing bonus in the Sands Goblet and Circlet respectively. Her elemental mastery does not contribute to the damage of Hyperbloom or Burgeon if characters like Kuki, Shinobu, or Toma are the triggers, so Ocean Hued Clam is the safe option for a standard Hyperbloom or Burgeon team when you don't want to run the 4-set instructor. Should you not care about Barbara's damage at all, then you can also roll some Maiden's Beloved pieces as you farm for some Anemo characters. A 2-set combination of Ocean Hued and Maidens, or even a full 4-set of Maidens, makes it extremely easy to build Barbara for off-field healing, since most players do spend some time in the Viridescent Vanera domain. Just keep in mind that you are missing out on the massive reason why it is worth on-fielding Barbara with a healer build and limiting yourself to an off-field build for the most part. Now that I've gone over pretty much everything that's made Barbara better up to this point, let me give you a quick rundown of the new teams mentioned for those looking to try out a new way to play Barbara. The team I talked about right at the start was the Barbara and Nilou Bloom team. This team can either go double Dendro for the Dendro Resonance or pick a third Hydro character and either Nahida or Alhaitham, who both have strong on-field Dendro capabilities. Especially for Nilou Bloom teams, Nahida is the best for Nilou Bloom teams due to her strong 1.5 unit Dendro application on her elemental skill and her frequent Dendro application with her Catalyst normal attacks. If you decide to double up on Dendro instead and keep Nilou and Barbara as the only Hydro characters, you can pick any of the two off-field applicators between Nahida, Dendro MC, Kole, and Yao Yao. Since this is a Barbara video, the most important thing to talk about is how her role varies in the double Hydro and double Dendro setup. You can use the classic healer build of double HP and healing bonus plus any HP weapon and the 4-set instructor or 4-set Ocean Hued Clam if you decide to use Nilou on field and keep Barbara off field. However, I did mention previously that you have the choice of on-fielding Barbara to create blooms with her normal and charge attacks for the double Hydro teams. This objective is best achieved by farming a full 4-set Gilded Dreams or 4-set Flower of Paradise Lost with the triple EM build discussed earlier in the video. Your weapons for the Bloom build are pretty free-to-play friendly with Sacrificial Fragments, the Sumeru craftable Fruit of Fulfillment, or if you happen to get lucky on Nilou's weapon banner, the limited banner 4-star Wandering Evan Star is also a fantastic option for the full EM build. To summarize, Barbara's role is mostly static in the triple Hydro Nilou team, and the healer build is always the safe option since your Dendro character will be the one triggering Nilou's Bountiful Course. If you own Nilou and want to run the double Hydro and double Dendro combination, feel free to switch your Barber build to full EM and have fun with some Bloom DPS. As for regular Bloom team variations, Barbara retains the same support builds with Instructor and Ocean Hued Clam, but this time her teammates changed since obviously we can't use Nilou. The core consists of Barbara plus Kuki Shinobu or Toma, and then one of the same off-field Dendro applicators from Nilou's Bloom teams that we just talked about. Especially with Nahida, feel free to pick another premium Hydro character like Xingqiu, Yelan, Kokomi, Ayato, or Child to maximize your Dendro core creation for the last slot. If you want to make this team completely free-to-play friendly, or if you can only afford to use Barbara for Hydro in this team, make sure to pick a second Dendro character for more application and the Dendro resonance. Between the two of Kole, Dendro MC, and Yao Yao, you'll have enough Dendro application even if you abuse her separate ICD between normal and charge attacks to create as many blooms as possible. Cyno and Barbara are about as basic as things get, since Cyno only pairs with Barbara for her original role as a healer and stat buffer. It is strongly recommended that you pair Nahida with Cyno, but if you don't have Nahida, then Dendro MC is the best option with the longest duration of Dendro application compared to the other 4-star Dendro options. Barbara can either carry the 4-set Ocean Hued Clam or the 4-set Instructor depending on what your other characters build. For example, Barbara can use the 4-set Instructor if your Dendro character is Nahida who runs the 4-set Deepwood Memories. But maybe you don't have a Nahida and instead have a cheap Dendro MC build with the 4-set Instructor instead of a fully invested one with 4-set Deepwood Memories. In that case, it would be more efficient for your Barbara to run the 4-set Ocean Hued Clam since you already have an Instructor buffer on your team. Ultimately, Barbara's job here is just to heal and provide the occasional Bloom reaction for Cyno and make use of the Thrilling Tales catalyst. The last slot provides a variety of support, whether that be Beidou or Official for Electro Energy, or maybe another Dendro unit to supply the Dendro Resonance and more energy for your other Dendro character. Last but not least, let's end this team section with the fascinating Ocean Hued Clam carry. The core of this team is most often Barbara, Official, and Rosaria. What may seem like a strange trio at first glance, Rosaria and Official provide Superconduct, which decreases the physical res of enemies. Ocean Hued Clam's damage is not affected by certain debuffs like defense reduction or buffs like physical damage bonus. The one debuff that serves as the exception to that rule is physical res shred. Having Official and Rosaria support Barbara not only makes the core free-to-play friendly with all 4-star characters, but it also effectively increases Barbara's Ocean Hued Clam damage. As mentioned before, the standard weapon to pair with Barbara's Ocean Hued Clam set is Kokomi's signature, Everlasting Moonglow, but unless you have a spare copy, it'd probably be better to save your Primo Gems and aim for an R5 Prototype Amber or an R5 Thrilling Tales. For those wondering about the last character, you can either choose another off-field Electro DPS or an off-field Hydro character for the newly changed Hydro Resonance. Xingqiu and Yelan often steamroll content no matter who they're paired with and can also be used in this Ocean Hued Clam Barbara team for massive personal damage and the extra HP from the Hydro Resonance. As a resident Barbara salesman, my job here is done. Did I sell you on Barbara, or were you already using Barbara before watching this video? Regardless, let me know your thoughts, builds, and teams for Barbara down in the comments below. Other than that, if you enjoyed this guide or thought it was useful, be sure to support both the video and the channel. You can follow me on Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, or sub to the YouTube channel, whatever people do nowadays. Other than that, it's the same as always. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.